In this lesson, we're going to look at how to create a project in Godot 4.4.1. Previously, we downloaded the Godot engine, in my case, Godot 4.4.1 DL folder. You can see here the actual program, which we're going to run in a second. Now, I also created a desktop shortcut of the same thing here, so it makes things easier for myself when I'm running it in the future. It doesn't really make much difference which way you do it. So we're going to run the Godot engine, and you can see what happens from there. So double click, and then I'm running, well, 3 monitors, but 2 monitors we generally do. So you can see here the Godot engine itself. Now, we will not be using the asset library at all in this particular video series, but you feel free to experiment with that, no problems at all. Okay, now we do have a number of ways we can create the new project. We can go to create here, we can go to create a new project from there. It doesn't matter which way you do it, as long as we create the new project. So when you run the Godot 4 engine, you'll see the projects tab. Just make certain that's selected. We go on to create. Now, this is very important even at the outset. You've got to make certain that we actually create our projects inside the folder that we created earlier. Remember, I created a folder which was here. I'll show you that now. We said documents, my Godot 4 project. So what we need to do is make certain we go to this folder in the project path first of all, because I did mention to you that Godot needs an empty folder to create a particular project, otherwise you get an error. So if I go to browse, make certain that this is selected on C. Now, depending how many disk drives you've got, to change that you click on the pull down there. I've got 3, so the choice is yours, but we're going to use C drive to make sure it's there first. You'll know there's a folder here that we created earlier, so double click on that. Now we've selected the correct folder, we can now say select current folder. Now this next bit is what we're going to call the project name. I'm going to call it 2D Platformer. We can call it anything you particularly want within a legal naming convention, but this is quite okay for me, and then we crack on from there. We're going to create a new folder, make sure that's already there, because that's going to create the new folder inside this project. Now these options here, depending on what type of system you have, what type of drivers you have, because projects in Godot demand or require the Vulkan type drivers, but I'm going to assume that everyone is running on a similar type machine. So I'm going to go to the compatibility mode here, and we will create the projects on this video series in the compatibility mode, because we can use OpenGL3, and that's quite a basic platform speed, but the fastest rendering of simple scenes. Now we're not going to create complex massive scenes here, so we're fine on that. So compatibility is perfect. Now if you were working as a team development, you could save the project in each of the users of your development into the GitHub. Now we're not going to use that on this project series, so I'm going to click none on there. I'm going to keep the edit now button, because we're going to edit the project as soon as it's opened. So as soon as I click on to create, it's going to move to the my Godot 4 projects folder in my documents. It's going to call it 2D platformer, and it's going to create this general compatibility mode. I'm not going to put it onto GitHub, and then go to create. Okay, now when you've done that, it'll think about it for a little bit. Then you'll be presented with this. Okay, now this I'll explain as we go along, so don't worry too much about that. But inside the Windows Explorer folder, you'll now see we have a 2D platformer folder created in the My Godot 4 projects folder in the My Documents folder. That's basically what we get. So if we double click onto this, you can see these files have already been created for us. Now this is very important that you remember this one. You do not, repeat, do not change the contents of this folder unless you really know what you're doing. I've had many students break this rule, and they've really destroyed a lot of hard work that they put in there by changing something in here, and Godot has not been updated and this type of thing. And I'll show you the reason why very soon. If we put resources inside here, and Godot will create an automatic JSON type file with all the details of each asset in its entirety. I'll show you more about that later, but rule number one, do not change things in here unless you really know what you're doing. Okay, so you have been warned. So we then have a new project. I'm going to maximize it so you can see what's going on. Now you'll notice straight away that we've got 2D, 3D, script, game, asset library. Asset library we're not bothering with. The game is the game screen when we start running the scenes, but more about that later. Now it will default as soon as you open Godot 4 to the 3D environment. I'm going to do a full course on 3D game development in Godot in the future. We'll only be doing 2D, so in here the only two main options we'll be looking at is 2D view and script view. So when we create scripts later, that's the view you need. If you get this view and you want to see a script, click onto the script view. It's very simple indeed, but just make certain that you remember these instances here. When we're creating scenes, the scenes that we create will appear in this scene window here. You'll see the book reference that quite often. The file system is very similar to the file system that we see in the Windows Explorer, but we'll do more about that very soon. Inside here is a very important window, the inspector. So wherever we got selected in this window or this window will reflect the properties of the selected items here inside the inspector window. The part at the bottom will be covering that more so when we come to animation and this type of thing. You'll find out more about this. Now you'll notice from this particular screen here we have a rectangle. This rectangle is directly linked to the project size of your project creation from here. Now we are going to start off this first project in a default 1024 by 600. You need to refer to the book in detail if you need any reference and what these screens and things are. So the way we do that, we go to the project tab, project settings, and you'll be using project settings quite a lot, so you can practice that at home. So then in the display tab here, In the window box, you'll notice two very important aspects here: viewport width and viewport height. We're going to do this to 1024, and in this bottom one, 600. Now, depending on what type of platform you are creating this project for, whether it be desktop, whether it be tablet, whether it be mobile phone, is very indicative of what size project area you will need and in what dimensions. So there's no general rule for that. You just have to make certain that that's correct for the platform you're creating the project on. Okay, we're going to leave it to windowed because that's the window mode that it'll run in. Resizable, so you can resize the window like you do generally inside of most Windows projects. And then once we've done this correctly, we click on to close. Now you'll notice that the project area reduces slightly, and that's where our game assets will all be put inside of there. Okay, so that is how to create a project in Godot 4.4.1, and we'll just for now go to save all scenes, even though we haven't got any scenes just at the moment, and that is all we need to know for this lesson. Next lesson we'll be creating a scene for the start of our game. So I'll leave you here and I'll see you in the next one.